Finance Minister Chris Sinclair says there is no escaping the fiscal adjustment program announced in the budget. He says it is underway and will be implemented in full as the country has no choice. Sinclair made the comment at a National Productivity Council Summit on Productivity and Competitiveness this morning. He says government is going to Parliament shortly to fully legalise measures announced in the last budget, including the consolidated tax.
That tax is expected to expire on the 31st of March 2015, and it will expire at that date. That is what the law will say, and that is what will happen. The municipal solid waste tax, that will go to Parliament in November, but as you would have remembered from the financial statement and budgetary proposals, that tax will not begin application until 2015. Therefore, it is not true to say, as some people have been saying, that the Commissioner of Land Tax is trying to collect or will be trying to collect tax without the appropriate legislation. The tax is not applicable to 2015.
Mr. Sinclair says Cabinet is expected to approve the bill Thursday. He adds details of the legislation will be shared before it is laid in Parliament. In relation to government's expenditure cuts, Sinclair says government held several meetings with stakeholders prior to developing the policies. He says he and Prime Minister Frundle Stewart recently met with heads of ministries and departments and have received positive feedback.
And I am happy to report that we are 80 to 90% where we need to be. There are some ministries which will have challenges, and we are working with those. There are some specialized departments which will have challenges, and we're working with those. But as the Prime Minister has said, our goal is well in sight, and therefore we expect full implementation of those adjustments. Some ministries were able to come back with more than we asked for.
Central Bank Governor Dr. Delisle Worrell says Barbados is still attractive to investors amidst projections from the International Monetary Fund that the island's economy is not expected to match the growth of some of its neighbours. Speaking at a media briefing at the bank earlier today, Dr. Worrell said the country's bonds are not speculative and are geared more for long-term investors.
Investors always make their decisions based on their own judgment. They may take rating agencies' views into consideration, but having been burned in the past by perhaps a little too slavishly following rating agencies, no investor now simply follows what the rating agencies say.
Dr. Worrell says the private sector is key to growing the economy and bringing in foreign exchange. He notes that Barbados ranks 47th in world competitiveness and is still first in the Caribbean. He stressed that returning the economy to a strong growth path is a marathon and not a sprint.
We don't know what the growth rate will be in 2014. Our best estimate is that it will be a little less than 1%. The IMF's best estimate is that it will be a little less than 1%, that it will be minus 1%. That's not a big range of difference. But the fact of the matter is nobody knows what it will actually be. But our concern is not what the growth will be in 2014. Our concern is what is a sustainable growth strategy for Barbados. The world is not going to end in 2014. And it is what happens in 2015 and 2016 and 2017.
The National Productivity Council, which is celebrating 20 years, is calling for a greater role in managing efficiency and enabling fiscal prudence in the public sector. Executive Director John Pilgrim says the council has been trying to encourage the use of key performance indicators in government.
I believe only about 15% of departments in government has done that, and I think now is an opportune moment to appeal or use the presence of our ministers to seek to ensure that all ministries, I think the legislation provides for it, give the Productivity Council the opportunity to work with them to develop KPIs so that during the estimates period, submissions are made with performance indicators which are clearly linked to the resources that are being requested.
Barbados will continue to fall short in addressing problems related to suicide because of the severe lack of data on the issue. Expressing concern about the situation is the Executive Director of the American Association of Suicidology, Lanny Berman. He spoke about the problem during a lecture on suicide prevention last night, hosted by the American Embassy at the Lord Erskine Sandiford Center. Mr. Berman says Barbados only has compiled statistics on suicide up to 2006.
What you see is dramatic increases in suicide rates from the mid-1980s through, give or take, the late 1990s, and then a significant reduction, and then they've spiked back up. So if we have a trend line here, the trend line is going to go like that. But trend lines with that kind of data don't make a lot of sense because, again, we could have 5 or 10 years of declining rates or 5 or 10 years of increasing rates if indeed we had more data. Look closely. What is the last year for which we have data in this country? 7 years ago. I can't tell you what happened in 2012 or 11 or 10 or 9 or 8 or 7 because we don't know.
Mr. Berman says local officials must get their house in order for Barbados to deal with the issue of suicide and help develop adequate prevention programs.
We cannot really prevent something like suicide until we have a reasonably thorough understanding of what the problem is, what the trends are, what the demographics are, what the risk factors are, and where the points of entry are that we might develop prevention programs for. We have a great deal of information, and I'm going to share as much as I can in a very brief time with you. But the reality, and what I will share with you as well, is that in this country we know very little about what's going on. And all prevention ultimately is local. All prevention depends on understanding the problem here.
Well, there were no classes at the Les Devon Secondary School today. That's because the school is mourning the sudden death of its principal, Diana Wilson. Reports indicate that she died early this morning. The cause of death is still unclear. Now, despite the sad news, Les Devon students turned up for school today, most of them unaware that classes had been called off by the Ministry of Education. Some people on the school compound shared their thoughts about the late principal.
She was a positive woman, you know, serious thing. I still can't digest that as yet.
But a nice woman, boss. Sad to say, but she gone.
Very nice lady. See her every morning.
Good morning. How you feel about it?
Sad.